We want to just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about TVL Tent, which is our This Valorant Life community. And I'm going to throw it over to Adam in terms of what we're hoping to accomplish with this community.
So this community is mainly a place for people like you guys that are trying to improve at the game, to have people around you that are similar. I know when I was trying to improve at this game, it felt pretty lonely, and you really don't have like a space to, I guess, differentiate yourself from the general Valorant community. And the general Valorant community, I think, you know, has a lot of different parts of the game that we don't really enjoy. There's a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of cope. There's a lot of encouraging bad habits, and not really just, playing the game how we think it deserves to be played. And our community is about respecting the game, respecting yourself, and respecting others. So if you think that sounds good, then I think you'll be a good fit for the community.
The community is a paid community, but what we're going to be doing is that the paid community is $5 USD per month. And that goes through Ko-Fi. There's a link in the channel description, and there'll be a link below as well. We're going to pool all those funds together, and when it reaches $800, we're going to actually create kind of a scholarship where we're going to have people apply, and the community is going to help us select who will win the scholarship and get to work with Adam through one of his coaching programs. And so that's one way we think we can take what this community is doing for good, give it to someone who may not otherwise be able to afford it, and is really intentional and excited about it. And so if this sounds like something you'd be excited about, we'd love for you to be a part of it. You can join us, kofi.com/thisvalorantlife. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 48 of This Valorant Life. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach to this episode. We do have a topic that we're going to get to later, but Adam and I always have conversations before and after we start recording, and we realize we should probably just have them on here because some of them are relevant, some of them aren't. And so we're just going to start off there. We're going to have a topic later, which is SoloQ, because I think it's an interesting topic, and I think I'd like to have an opinion and like a stance on that as a podcast. But I don't want to start there. I want to start with right where we ended our conversation, Adam, which is money doesn't buy happiness. And you were just kind of relaying why you hear that a lot, but you said there's an inherent skepticism when you hear that. So what do you mean by that?
So, I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm in the stage of I'm 24, turning 25 in a couple of months, and like in the like personal development space or whatever, like trying to be ambitious or whatever, you want to make money. Mm-hmm. And like for me, I've always been pushing the more aspect, trying to make more money, because like I'm not at the threshold where I want to be at.
Yeah, sure.
But then you hear like in these, because like I'm in the self-improvement space and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and you always hear like, money won't buy happiness. Like you should try to be happy with what you have. And you were just talking about this even before, is like people always move the goalpost. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's very much the thing with money. And it feels like that lesson can't be learned until you have it. I remember hearing about this book, or maybe I do believe it was a book, but it was also referenced in a podcast. And it's like, there's two mountains, like two peaks, whatever. And until you get over the first mountain or the first peak, which is money, you actually aren't able to traverse onto the second peak, which is finding happiness. And that's kind of how I feel about it. But I also understand that you might actually just be able to climb the second mountain first if you start at the base of that mountain and not the first mountain. Like if you think about it, like instead of having to go, like it's not an obstacle if you just start on the side. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I feel about the money thing. But that's also how I feel about the thing that you were referencing before, how we got into this, which was having to live in the moment, like living life, how like taking action, living life because you have limited time. And I feel like both of those lessons are like lessons you can't really learn until you've gone through it, or like you've had the experience that you felt it.
So right now, I left my old job a couple of years ago. I had no income. I built up my business to the point where I'm today, like pretty comfortable. And like right when I'm comfortable, I'm starting to reinvest all of that into building Training Arc. So suddenly I'm uncomfortable again. And there's this feeling then of whenever you start something new that you want it. Like I deeply, with every fiber of my being, want it to be successful. And that can be profoundly motivating, but also has this sense of anxiety of like, oh, I need to do more, I need to do this. And I think what I've just really been trying to lean into is this shift from anxiety and trying to control an outcome, which I can't directly control success. What I can do is really lean into this gratefulness viewpoint, which is I get to do these things. I get to work with the current advisory stuff that I do, which I really enjoy and it's super interesting. And I get to build out like a business around helping people improve at a first person shooter, which is kind of totally aligned with like my entire life in a way. And I think there's a real shift for me to be in this moment, even as I really desperately want it to work, to be able to enjoy the journey, like enjoy the tasks. I think the reality is it's kind of like if you've ever watched a great TV series or a great book, is when you get close to the end, you realize that you kind of wish you weren't close to the end, because you realize that you'll never go back and be able to experience this for the first time again. And if you're on a journey towards a goal, that's exactly what's in your life today. Like as you build out the Dopai Dojo, this community for yourself, this will be the first time you get to do that. And I have confidence it's going to be successful for you, but part of it is enjoying this process of discovery, enjoying this feeling, you were talking about it before, this feeling of progress on a week-to-week basis. I think I've spoken to people who have way more money than me, and I've been told before, man, I'm jealous that you have this purpose, because that not everyone has it. And so I think there's an element of leaning into what you're doing and the goals that you're going after, and being really thankful that you get to do this rather than feeling like you need to have achieved that before you're something. Because it's interesting, there's so many people who watch your videos who would think, if I made it to Radiant, I would be someone. And you're Radiant, and you're like, I've done it before. There's like, I don't know, is it 200 people? 500 people? Is it 500?
500.
Yeah. There's 500 people here on a North American server. There's another 500 in Europe and in APAC. You know, it's special, but it's not that special. It doesn't make me a pro. It just makes me top 0.01 percentile or whatever the number is, right? And so you've experienced that, and you know that it doesn't, there's no like halo that you don't go Super Saiyan and have like this halo around you as you walk around the world. Nothing really changes. And so it's really an internal choice of how important is that to you? Do you feel accomplished in having done that? Because there's no like achievement unlocked that suddenly the world gets easier, you know, which is kind of what we think will happen.
Yeah, I guess what I kind of hear is that it's almost like we're blind. Because like, for example, I'm having this idea in my head that I'm moving the goalposts in terms of like happiness with, like, let's just say the money thing. Mm-hmm. Like I have like a money financial goal that I want to reach for like a monthly income. And like, that's what I'm working towards. But then there's someone else that looks at me and thinks, like you were saying with the Radiant thing, and that's kind of what I need to be happy. But then I look at it in myself, I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. And then there's also someone there in the future that has the money goal that's telling me that the money thing won't make me happy. But then I'm kind of saying that that's not true until I get there. But then I'm telling the same thing about the person trying to get to Radiant. It's like, I can only tell that person back there that Radiant's not going to make them happy or whatever, fulfilled, because I've done it. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not able to kind of translate that knowledge about the money thing onto this thing.
The reality, right, is that money is important. You need to be able to put a roof over your head. You want to support the people around you. You don't want to be worried about it. So it has like real utility, right? But I think it's a real choice to be excited about that journey versus feeling like it's not enough until you're there, you know? Mm-hmm. Because there's tons of little things to celebrate on that journey. And I think the other piece to it, and we've talked about this before too, and this is where, you know, it sounds like a stretch that when we talk about this idea of useful skills you can build in Valorant that apply elsewhere. But we've talked about before this idea of process goals. What are your process goals in your game that will lead to your improvement over many games, right? So instead, a process goal is not win the game. A process goal means I'm going to use a util combo on my execute on a site on Haven every time and see how it goes. That's a process goal because it's 100% within your control. And similarly, for you, it's kind of in this journey of your entrepreneurship journey. It's like, what are the process goals for that? Is it signups? Is it engagement? Is it satisfaction through surveys with people in your community? Or is it going to be more subjective, which is okay too? But like, what are the process goals that if you commit to doing it on a week to week? So in a sales context, if you're trying to get to XYZ sales in a business, like the process goals would be, I'm going to make 5 sales calls every single week, or maybe every single day. And if I do that over months, it makes hitting my income goal like inevitable. Like that will happen no matter what, you know? And so it's like being able to focus on those process goals. And then because you're focused on the process goals, because you're confident it's going to get you where you need to go, that you can be more present in this journey rather than waiting to live until you've achieved the goal and feel like you're good enough.
I guess something that comes to mind when you're talking about that is I feel like I very easily can do process goals when it relates to Valorant. Like, for example, I can always warm up before I play.
Yes.
And I can make sure that I mental reset before I go into the next queue and not insta queue. Or, you know, like it's not something that will happen consistently always, but like 9 out of 10 times. But then when it like relates to like other parts of my life, like let's just say to the gym, for example, the process goal to going to the gym is actually working out, I guess, because you want to get, you know, in shape later. And I've found it to be very, very difficult to do on a consistent basis, even though I like working out. It's just like finding the time for it. And then only recently have I been really consistent with it because I have a gym partner I'm going with. But then I try to think about that in terms of like work related stuff. And one of the most important things for me right now is having deep work blocks so that I can create to move the needle. And probably for the past 2 or 3 years, it's very rare that I get deep work blocks done on a consistent basis. When really, like going back to that sales call thing, is like maybe if I had one deep work block every single day, the needle is moved enough. Just like how I need to make 5 sales calls a week or a day. And I find it really difficult to do that, even though it's really easy for me to do in Valorant. And that's just a weird thing, I guess.
I think it's not dissimilar. And here again, a Valorant, a metaphor for life. Who knew this could go so deep? But it's just when you coach players, sometimes your advice will be different for different players. Aggressive players sometimes need to be less aggressive, and less aggressive players need to be more aggressive. But there's no blanket advice there. It's going to be tailored to that person. There's an element of you helping them figuring out. There's an element of them figuring it out too. And I think the similar is true here, which is if you know that deep work block is the key for you, then the problem you're trying to solve, similar to trying to rank up, the problem you're trying to solve is what are the conditions that I need to make happen to make that easy? Is it planning it out once a week? Is it literally packing up a laptop and like going to the library because you won't play Valorant there? You know, like for some people it would be an environment shift. For some people it's planning it out. Maybe it's even just shifting in your house to work in a different place. There's a lot of things you can try to see the thing that works for you, because you found, as an example, that the gym buddy works for you. So maybe it's an accountability partner. Maybe there's someone you can find that will do deep work blocks with you, you know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's a cohort that I was part of for like LinkedIn to do LinkedIn stuff, and they have a writing block. Like everyone goes online for an hour and a half and we do a writing block, and it was helpful, you know, because you're just committed to doing it. Everyone kind of reads what they wrote at the end and you just show up and do it. It's like showing up to a fitness class is easier for some people and preferable for a lot of people than going to a gym and managing their own workout. So when we think about it as an experiment to be solved, as opposed to a character impediment that will never change, that's kind of the unlock, I think.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, I guess when I think about things that have worked, like the dojo launch itself was when I was on vacation. Like, I was in a completely different environment.
So when you have space, it changes your ability to think about things. You know, even just going for a drive can change our ability to think about things. And certainly when you're in a different environment and when you have nature and space, it does open up your thinking. Like we do get, and I don't agree with everything in this book, but you know, we're just talking about it. This is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and in there, and of course he has this luxury, but he says in the book, his most valuable time is the space to think, because our decisions in many ways drive more value than the work that we do. Like deciding where to work is probably more important with insight than just working extra. And so his thing is just having space to think. And I think when you go somewhere, you invariably have space to think, right? And so I think there's a lot of power in that.
I guess that ties back to the thing that you're recommending me to do, which is the weekly review, like having that space to actually kind of sort through their stuff, which I've kind of done to some extent, but maybe not as fully as I could be doing.
I think what that weekly review looks like for you though could be really different than what it looks like for me, you know, and it might be a shifting location, it might be a walk to reflect on things too. But I think finding the things that give you most value are helpful, because we all have had that before where all of a sudden we have a very simple, elegant solution to something we've been wrestling with. And you think, why couldn't I have thought about that before? But it's partly because sometimes it's because we're too busy. But I think in today's culture, it's mostly because we're too distracted to have the space to notice or reflect on things.
It makes me appreciate my clients' journeys, because I feel like I tell them to do X thing, or I point them in this direction, and then like a week later they come back and they've done the thing, at least the most successful ones. And like if I'm putting myself into their shoes, I feel like that would be kind of hard for me to do. Maybe not though, because like I guess if I'm thinking about my experiences when I have worked with coaches, having that accountability is a big thing, which is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That is weird that we're so, we as in me, I guess in this case, so like less accountable to myself. But like if there's a different person in there, it's like autopilot.
We're social creatures, right? Like we want approval, which for that type of stuff is useful. It's not useful when you say yes to things that you don't want to do because you're looking for approval, or you try to be different people or different type of person around different people because you want approval. But in some cases, the gym buddy thing, if someone goes there and you said you were going to meet them and you don't show up and you actively feel bad and that gets you to the gym, pretty useful.
Yeah, I mean, it saved me so many days. I mean, even just earlier this week, I woke up, I was like, I'm not going. And I lay in bed an extra 5 to 10 minutes after my alarm. I'm like, well, I have to get up because like there's going to be someone there. And then like eventually you get out.
There's been a lot of times where I didn't want to work out and my wife basically kicked me in the butt and was like, just go do this. And it's helpful. It's helpful to have someone with you. And we were just talking about this. If you always make the easy choices, you will have a hard life. If you make the hard choices, you will have an easier life. If you choose to do hard things, if you do the working out, if you do the reading, if you commit to the work, like you will have more outcome from that than trying to delay it. It's a good heuristic in life.
So I guess the question would that also apply if you make the hard thing easier? So like on this note too, like I could see someone being super like take this as a black and white approach. I'm like, I have to do hard things and make sure that they're hard. And I'm going to white knuckle my way through it. And I'm going to jump into the deep end. And then I could also see like maybe like an Ali Abdaal approach where like you try to make the thing that's hard feel good, like his book, Feel Good Productivity. And, you know, in this case, like if I'm trying to go to the gym and it's hard, then I get a gym partner and I do the thing, like the outcome is the only thing that matters, maybe? Or is it the fact that I did
think
the
it's
hard
the direction.
thing?
I think it's that it is hard, and if you want to make it easier, that's fine. If you make it
Like,
easier
as long
for
as you
you, I
do
think
the
that's a
thing.
good life hack. Because then because it doesn't cease being hard. It just becomes easier to get there. Like, it doesn't matter if you can find a way to get to like 1 rep left and have that be easy, then all power to you. I don't know how you can do that. That's always going to be rough.
That's true.
But getting to the gym, if you can make that easier, like, do it.
So you don't have to be so purist on the thing.
Well, and this is where there's like wisdom is being able to balance things. Heuristics are not laws. Laws are inescapable facts, immutable facts of life that you can't change. That the universe is moving to greater entropy. That's an immutable law. A heuristic is a general rule of thumb. So you have to apply it with some level of wisdom. It also, you're not going to get points for eating everything with your hands just because it's harder. Like, you don't get points in life for making things harder and acting like a Neanderthal. So there is an element of judgment here. But in general, you want to try to find hard things, because if you look back in your life too and you think about the moments that matter, because not all moments are created equal. If you think about the times that stand out of areas where you felt accomplished, they were hard things. They were things that you worked towards for a while and then you accomplished them and it felt good. And it wouldn't have felt nearly as good if it was easy. There's no Hikaru or Magnus Carlsen for checkers, because it's not a hard game.
I have a story that I shared with my girlfriend about, like, a kind of embarrassing story. But I think it's somewhat applicable here, so just bear with me. I can't even remember exactly how old I was. I was like 16 or 18. It's like maybe like sometime in high school, or maybe just I was graduating high school. But I was going to a trip to the beach with my cousin, and first of all, like, I don't do stuff like that. Like, I don't say yes to this type of thing. It's like, I guess my mom like asked me, do I want to go on this trip with my cousin? Which normally I've only gone on trips with my family, like my parents.
Yeah.
So this is already in the realm of unknown. And then I go into this trip and I don't know anyone there. It's like a church group. I don't know anyone aside from my cousin. And that's really uncomfortable. And looking back on it, I'm thinking, like, why would I ever do that? But like, present me thinking about it thinks, like, I'm grateful that I did something like that, because it was a hard thing for me to say yes to this unknown trip. And then, like, there's a bit more that goes into this, but like they pretty much all skated, like skateboarding and stuff. So one night, like on the boardwalk by the beach, they were like, oh yeah, let's go out, we're gonna, walk the beach or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll go. Like, all the younger people were going out, all the adults were staying in. So like, well, it'd be weird if I stayed. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out. And then a couple minutes later, they all skate off, and then I'm alone. So all the people because I didn't know anyone, right? And then, so this is kind of like the social anxiety thing was like kind of cooking up. I was like, oh my God, I'm left out, like blah, blah, blah. And I mean, looking back at it, it was just like, it was a really terrible experience. And that's probably why I don't really like social settings and big groups. Yeah. Because I feel left out. But I feel like I learned a lot about myself after that.
What did you learn?
It's like, I learned that I'm actually okay with being alone.
Yeah.
Like, I did just end up walking the beach, and it was like kind of a nice thing. I could have taken that experience and been like, oh my God, this is so stressful. Like, I can't believe they all left me, whatever. But then I was kind of like, well, I'm on vacation. They're on vacation. They don't know me. I don't know them. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing where I'm kind of glued to them, and they don't have to be glued to me. So, I mean, we ended up like kind of going back into it. But at the very end of this, kind of continuing this story, on the way back, we stopped at a Subway's, and I didn't grow up eating Subway, and I didn't really know how to customize my sandwich. So this was pretty much, I didn't know what to order. Yeah. So I was like the whole time feeling uncomfortable, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll just get what this other people order. And like, I was hoping that someone else would like, order something good that I can kind of copy. Didn't really find anything. Yeah. So at the end of it, I was just like, well, do I even like lettuce, tomato, onion on like a thing? And then like it was just like the point being is like the whole experience was so uncomfortable that I didn't even know how to order a sub sandwich.
Yeah.
And now I'm looking back at that now, I'm like, this age, like 16, 18,
Yeah.
I don't even know how to order a sandwich. And now I'm looking back at that now and cringing. I'm like, that's great. Like I'm glad that I'm different now
Yes.
than when I was back then, because it would be even crazier if I'm 24 now and not able to order a Subway sandwich and didn't even know what I liked. So
I think there's an element there of like, one, realizing how far you've come, but two, also being able to give yourself grace that yourself at 16, having had, if you had been told by a friend that they went into, I think this is like really common for non-English speakers. If you go into a diner and you order breakfast and they're like, how do you want your eggs? Do you know what the options are? Like, probably not. And so if you've never had an experience like that before, I think it's totally fair as well. Even though that's not what you would want for yourself, it's totally fair
Right.
to know that like it's that you can have a 6-inch or a foot long, that there's the white cheese and the yellow cheese, whatever cheese that is, you know, you can toast it, not
like
toast
8
it.
different types of breads.
And then like, yeah, there's 8 different sauces and they probably don't all taste good together, you know? And I think that there's grace for yourself too.
Yeah. I feel like because of that, looking back on it, I feel like because of that experience with Subway, that when the first time I went to have Korean barbecue, I was like kind of a similar experience, but I wasn't actually so, you know, I was like embarrassed, I guess, or ashamed, because I was like, oh, this is just a bunch of new stuff that I got to try. So then now I kind of know what my dipping sauce is in Korean barbecue and like how to mix it and all that stuff. So yeah, that was a full tangent, but I just thought it kind of fit.
There's always, this is true, at least for me, there's always this desire to know what I'm doing, to have, you know, there's that phrase like act like you've been there before. And I think it's fairly common, and yet the flip side of it is you only ever get to discover a new city once. You only ever get to visit a country for the first time once. And so as much as you want to kind of feel like a local and know your way around or know what's good or bad, I think there's a real beauty in being able to savor the first time you get to learn and do things. Like savor being a noob.
Yeah, that's the hard thing. I think as we grow up, it's like you can't, it's like more shunned upon to be a noob. And I forget where I heard this from, but it was like, that's why like kids, one of the reasons why maybe they learn so quick is they're not afraid of asking like stupid questions. Maybe you told me that, I don't know, but I feel like I wonder if it's the same in this case. Is like you can experience a lot more in life if you're okay with asking or doing stuff and being a complete noob at it, which I do feel like I have a resistance to do that for sure.
We all have some level of self-preservation in terms of our self-consciousness. The real question, I think, is how is that serving you and how is that not serving you? And I think for most people, it's probably not serving you. You know, if you want to start that YouTube channel, the reality is no one around you will know. Ask that girl out or ask that boy out, you know, or whoever you want to ask out, ask them out. I think there's an element where an inability to stretch into those things inherently makes your life smaller. And the less that you can feel comfortable with, if the current set of your experiences is the only thing that you feel comfortable with, then the box in your life that you can live in will stay a constant size. And it will probably actually end up getting smaller. And that's a choice. And I think for you and for myself, and I'm sure for all of the listeners, like I wouldn't want that for people.
This all kind of stemmed from talking about like looking back on your moments and appreciating the hard moments. And I feel that leaning in, like actively finding hard stuff is like easy to say. Maybe a question would be like, how can you find something to do that's hard that feels aligned? Because like, I guess for me in that moment, reflecting on that story, the reason why I said yes, probably, was because I wanted to go to the beach, but I didn't account for all the other stuff. and it ended up being hard. And then maybe even just related to what I'm doing now, like I would say building the dojo is a difficult thing. Like it's not, you don't just snap your fingers and it happens, but it's because it's something that I want to do. I want to have a community. So I guess I'm kind of answering the question almost. Like you do a hard thing because there's an outcome you want.
You do a hard thing because it's aligned with where you want to go. The other part of it is you've already gotten used to putting yourself out there. And so I think what you probably discount is that for you, what's just a hard thing for other people is out of their reach. I think there's a lot of people that they're so excited at some point to start their YouTube channel and they haven't. And you have, and you've put yourself out there and you've streamed to get to Radiant, and that's not an easy place to put yourself because there's a lot of pressure there. And so by way of doing that, by way of actually creating in yourself this capacity to do hard things, that's why you can launch the dojo, because you're willing to put, you've created in yourself a skill and capacity to put yourself out there, and doesn't scare you. Like it scares you, but you're still willing to do it. And so courage is not, there's a saying, which is bravery is not the absence of fear. It's just what you choose to do when you feel scared. And so you've created in yourself a capacity to step into these things.
So it, I guess, brings up the question, like, if I were to listen to this for the first time and like I'm level 1 in a video game, like where do you start?
Don't presume to know anything. I think we get ahead of ourselves by saying we're silver, but we're better than these guys without hands. If you're always a student, I think that's a better way of looking at things, because I think the problem is when you feel like you know everything, or you feel like you know how the game should be played, that's when you start looking externally. That's when you stop taking ownership, and that's when it becomes more about protecting your ego than growing as a player. Right? And I think if you're starting level 1, then it's like your mindset, which is, instead of hoping to just become Radiant overnight, if that's your goal, that's a great goal. But to enjoy that your journey of learning this game is starting now, and you get to enjoy and figure out different pieces of it, and you get to enjoy and figure out exactly what is going to work for you as a player, because all of us are different.
I find that that's where, when I work with clients that have the thing where they'll say like, I want to get to Immortal and then stop, or like I want to get to Immortal and then I'll be happy and quit the game, or whatever. Like, I find that when that is the thing that's said, it's very difficult for them to they run into more roadblocks, like mentally or performance wise, or they overthink things.
What would be the different goal that you think is more supportive or helpful?
Like, typically with younger players, they play the game because they enjoy it, and obviously they have like a long-term goal. But with the ones that have made the most progress, they just enjoy the game and they want to get better at it. Like, for example, I had a coaching call earlier today, and one of my clients that I started working with, he was Plat 1 when he started. Like, he just got the Plat 1. And, maybe he could have kept climbing without coaching, but like he was like a Gold 3 Brimstone player.
Okay.
And when we started coaching Plat 1, and then today, Ascendant 1. Amazing, right? Like, first session was like in November or something, so it's been a couple of months with some breaks and stuff like that, obviously due to the holidays. But I was just thinking, I was like, what drives this guy? And he literally just enjoys the game. Like, he didn't really like want to do XYZ. He was just like, this game is fun, dude. And then there you go. It's just like, it was very easy to work with this guy. Super cool.
In the book Range, they talk about that. There's a book, Grit, which is that they found that people who have grit outperform people who have high IQs.
Okay.
And it's that you stick with hard things, right? And Range doesn't refute grit. it just points out that the conversation around grit, this ability, this resilience, this ability to come back, is more than just about your willpower. As much as he's really impressive, not all of us want to become David Goggins. Not all of us want to like stay hard all the time. You know, that seems like a very tiring existence, not a very fun one. The book Range talks about this idea of grit predicts success, but part of grit is not just trying hard. Part of grit is finding the thing for which you like, such that you have grit. And I think that's kind of what you're capturing there. There will be parts of that fellow's journey that will be hard, but he'll keep going because he likes it. And I think that's part of maybe recapturing for people is what part of Valorant, what part of this ranked journey, what part of playing this game do you love and enjoy, and try to recapture that. Because if it's just a soulless ranked grind for you, that's not gonna be the type of situation that will help you have resilience. You have to be able to enjoy what you're doing. Ultimately, this is a fun hobby for us to improve at. And so figuring out what that is for you is important, because otherwise the pure grind and just forcing yourself to do it would tell me that it's probably not a good fit, or your mindset is really off.
I feel like that's very easily applicable to a hobby, because you can easily pick it up or drop it. But like, how do you kind of apply that to something that's much more important in your life, like health or maybe career? Because like, you hear all the time that people work this 9-to-5 job that's like not super terrible, that they have to leave it, but it's like kind of okay, but then it has like some things that you don't like about it, but they're not like super excited to be there, but it's just like it's paying the bills, and they're kind of in this comfortable state. And
this comes back to the Designing Your Life book, right? Which is, if you haven't read it, it's a great book, especially if you're thinking about what you want for your career. But part of it is what's your view on life and what's your view on work. And sometimes it's because your view on work is entirely incompatible with actual work you do. In which case, it's not about money. It's about finding better work. I think what's helpful though is sometimes it's not even about changing your jobs. It's changing how you approach your job, so it's more aligned with what you want to do for work. I think there is a whole universe out there of leave your work and follow your dreams, but that doesn't work for most people. And it's not an appropriate solution for a lot of people if it puts you in financial jeopardy, right? And so then it becomes, how do you shift, or how do you steer your life in a way then that allows your work to be more life-giving to you, which I think is entirely possible. It doesn't mean everyone has to leave and start their own business, or leave and turn their hobby into a business. But I think it does mean you need to explore different options.
There you go.
Cool.
You want to go back to the original topic of the SoloQ?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the original topic was SoloQ. So I've been hearing just through like interviews for Training Arc and stuff, is that there's this idea that I need a duo queue in order to play ranked. And I think, and I'd love to hear what you think they are too. I think the main motivations for that are feeling that ranked queue is too much of a crapshoot with 4 random teammates, trying to take control of that situation, at least to some degree, by having a duo. And maybe from like a social anxiety point of view, having like one other buddy with you, along with, instead of 4 random internet strangers. Like, would that be what you think most people who really want to duo over SoloQ, those are the motivations, or are there any more you would add?
I think those are, yeah, I think those are accurate. Like, maybe something I would like add would be that I wonder if there's like some type of feeling that they can't do enough to carry a game. And they're afraid that if they play SoloQ and they aren't able to climb, and then they de-rank, that it's a reflection on them, so they want someone else.
To
So I guess it kind of
diversify the blame.
Yeah, yeah. Like, oh yeah, my duo was in there too. I feel like that might be a bit more of like a subtle one that might not, like people might not voice it,
Yep.
but I could see that being something.
So I think there's two kind of areas to talk about. One is just how ranked games are structured and why the duo queuing doesn't necessarily make sense in that context. And then the second one is around the broken by concept view on solo queuing, which is Coach Curtis and Coach Nathan. They talk about this idea of course, they also have lots of players in their community that want to go pro one day. And part of going pro is making it to challenger. And in their mind, part of making it to challenger and getting good enough to get picked up by a team and being good at team play is really just being good enough on it at the game by yourself. And so they have a real focus on solo queue over duo queuing. And I think my gut is that the same thing applies in Valorant. If you want to become a really good player and one day play for a really good team, then you really need to aim for like a Radiant level as a singular player in order to be able to slot into any team and be useful. I think if you're only useful in the context of a highly coordinated like team play or premier type play, I think that's going to really hamper your firepower and skill level to be able to actually compete at higher levels. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's like 100% true, but I think people want it to be not true because it's a lot harder to climb in a solo queue aspect or a solo queue context than it is to kind of climb in a coordinated aspect where you have more things in control. Like, for example, I think a lot of people will be like, oh, if I'm able to get good enough in Premier and then play at the pro level, but I never hit Radiant, it shouldn't matter. So that's where people will say ranked doesn't matter. And then they don't play ranked. And I fell into this mindset where I was like, well, ranked is going to teach me bad habits, or I don't enjoy playing ranked, so I'm just going to focus on my time in scrims. I'm not going to play ranked as much. But what you tend to see with players like that, myself included, is that you fall off. Like, you don't get the micro details of how a round is played or how like util interactions or like a small timing thing, or maybe your mechanics just aren't as up to par, or maybe you're just not as willing to make like a solo play to win the round. But I guess what I would say to that as well is you do tend to have players that kind of come out of the solo queue ladder and then put into a coordinated team environment, and they never grow out of that.
They're ranked play.
And and typically you do see that with like younger players, like if you're just looking at the pro scene.
Well, that's why they typically slot in as a tip of the spear role. Like most of those cracked straight from ranked players, like a Primi, come in as a duelist. They don't often come in as a support player. And I think that's partly because the team then revolves around them rather than them having to revolve around the team.
I guess that's exactly what happened with Tens, if you think about it. And then he eventually moved over.
They all do. I remember there was a quote from Vanity, this is a while ago, where he was complaining about one of the teams, I forget who, but the IGL, let's say it was FNS, wasn't dropping his rifle for his fragging teammate on a save, or a partial buy. And he's like, when I was playing on V1, he's like, I should be dropping my rifle for Penny or Zelsis, because back then Zelsis was the young cracked guy. Right now he's like the old grizzled veteran,
right,
but like back then he was like the young cracked like flex player, right? And so I think they all kind of shift. Like they all mostly start in the duelist role and then they move over. They don't typically start in other roles and then shift in if they're coming straight from like a highly touted ranked position.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I think that's where it's again from this almanac of Nouvelle Africaine, because I just read it recently and so it's just like stuck in my head, is that our feelings are often how we want reality to be, but it doesn't change the facts. And the facts are, if that you want to be playing at a high level, you want to play at a pro level, then your skill set needs to be representative of that. You actually, to play at that level, you want to be able to solo queue and have your sole skill set be able to rise above all the variance and randomness of ranked. And if you're able to rise above all the way to Radiant or in a top 100 level, then that shows that you have a ton of skill, which then you can just adopt into a team environment. I think if you're in a team environment and you don't have those skills, well, it's hard to grow them, right? I think it's easier to chip and form a really raw but high potential product into a good team player. But it's not, you can't take a team player and then suddenly create them into a mechanical demon. It has to be, I think the road is only a one-way road.
Yeah, I think that is true. Like when I work with players that are in like team environments, like they play collegiate or they play premier or they typically play in 5 stacks or trio queues, there's a ton of like, I don't want to even say bad habits. Typically my conversation with them goes, well, you're making the smart play here, but you're not making the ranked play, or you're not making the risky play, or you're not making the play to win. You're making the smart play, and I don't disagree with it, but really you should be thinking in this mindset instead, because it's more conducive to your journey as a player. And a lot of that is like, I feel like I have to preface it with that, because like otherwise they will immediately say, well, this is the right play, or like logically, right? But like the way like it works out in practice, it's too theoretical, I guess. So yeah, it does seem to be very, very common. It's never really been the opposite, where I work with someone that has played in coordinated environments and they're really good in ranked. Like I haven't seen it yet.
And that's a part of it too. And you were just talking about this earlier around like, how should a player start their ranked journey and grow as a player? Like, I'm super guilty of this, of feeling like I'm right and therefore it's right in the game. And the reality is that Valorant and so many other games is such a fluid game that what is technically correct usually doesn't mean it's correct in that game, right? In pro play, you have an anchor because you know that a team will punish you with a lurk. But the technically correct play in a ranked environment, especially a low elo one, is to never expect a lurker, because that's expecting a level of play that is beyond the capability of the people you're playing against, right? And so the technically correct play is to make them punish you for not having an anchor before you anchor, right? And I think it's this idea then of not trying and play technically perfect Valorant. Part of it is submitting to this idea of sometimes you just need to play jail Valorant and figure out what works, right? I think part of the interesting part of the fun is figuring out what is going to work in your game. And if you can consistently try and figure out what's going to work in your game, that's going to win you a lot more games than saying, well, actually you should do this. And when you actually do that and it's technically correct, but it's not correct in your game and you lose more RR, like, you don't get points for that. You don't get points for being correct most of the time if it's not correct in that game.
Yeah, I feel like even just reflecting on my own journey back to Radiant, when I had like this idea of what the game should be played out, that's when I would make the least amount of progress. And that's also when I was the most frustrated. Like, I would try to call this thing and play this way and blah, 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 blah. And like the more I resist against it, the less like it was working. And then I switch back to Raze in the next act, and I'm just double satcheling, like running at them to find like a random timing. And then like I end the act with like a 70+% win rate on Raze, because I'm playing like leaning into like the ranked chaos and seeing what works. And I mean, it's so true. It's just like, it's very weird, which I guess going back to the original topic, like why you should solo queue versus duo queuing, maybe in a duo queue environment you might feel like you can't go for those crazy plays because you would let your duo down. But if you're playing solo queue, you're like, well, these are 4 randoms that I might not play with again, I'm gonna go for the crazy play.
I was just watching G2 play Trace Esports today, and G2 was on their map pick on Abyss, and they had just, I think this is B site, G2 was defending. There was a Astro Wall, and they did a Rolling Thunder on a retake, and Jogamo followed the Rolling Thunder right behind the Astro Wall, did like a flash, and then jumped through like on the right side, you know, that ledge on the right side, and he jumped through and he killed the guy and then jumped back. And it's like, that shouldn't work. Like someone should kill you while you're jumping. But I think that there's this part of the feel of Valorant. Some players are good at finding timings because they have a feel, and I think some players are good at channeling that ranked chaos, that unexpected. They'll never expect me here. That causes them to outperform because they can just channel a little bit, just enough to throw the game off balance, but not so much that they're playing out of structure or losing the team value. And I think there's an element of just being able to like turn on that like gut feel of it's time to make a crazy ranked play because they won't expect it, because everyone is expecting perfect play. And I think you wouldn't learn that if you're always trying to play perfect Valorant.
It reminds me of Demon 1. Like there was this video that Trick made about Demon 1 like a while ago, where like Demon 1's like, I guess I forget the exact word, but like the way he gets value that's different from everyone else is that he just face checks angles. So like if he's on defense, he's just standing there, and then you peek into him, and then he'll kill you, and then he'll stay for a second, and then he's getting utiled, he'll stay for a third. Like that's how he kind of moves the needle. Whereas like normally you get one, you get out. That's how Zekken plays. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I have this like thought on Zekken. I think he's a great player. I think he has potential to be one of the best. Yes. But I feel like he plays a little too perfect. Yeah, he'll get one TP out, and he'll play for the retake, and then he's not able to have as much impact as say a Jogamo or an Aspas, where they might play a bit more greedy or something of that nature. So almost in that sense, like the skill ceiling for like a player like Tens is always going to be higher than a player like Zekken. And I wonder if you want your Zekken to kind of be that type of like variance, or would you rather have a consistent duelist all the time? And I would guess you would want more of a Tens in hard games.
I think, and this is getting into like, I think the vibes side of the game, which is we know that vibes are important. Everyone's been in a game where after you go 0-5, people stop coordinating buys. People aren't communicating about what they're doing in the round because people feel a little lost. And I think that's where having a player that is a little crazy, there's this concept from basketball, which is the irrational confidence guy. So the irrational confidence guy is not very good, but is good because they usually come off the bench, and you need bench scoring. And so you need the irrational confidence guy to be the guy that's always confident. He just came off the bench. He's not warm to just go out and take shots. And the irrational confidence guy always believes in himself. And in that way, it serves a useful purpose. They're not the starters, and that's why, because they're irrationally confident, but they like serve a purpose. And I think there's an element of having a little bit of crazy of someone like a Jogamo that serves a purpose. I think it can give a team a spark when it doesn't feel like it can do it something, and I think that if you just play perfectly, I wonder if you miss that spark.
Yeah, which I guess.
All this to say though, SoloQ I think is king if you want to improve. And I don't think it's bad to duo queue, but maybe we'll jump into the mathematical side of things, which is, I think this is true of Valorant. This is true in League, which is if you don't duo with someone, the game will try and match the ELO or the hidden MMR such that the game is approximately a 50% win rate. And if it isn't a 50% win rate, like let's say you're 55% favored to win, so you're favored to win, then you're not going to gain as much RR. If you're 45% to win and you win, then you gain more RR. So it kind of evens out in that respect. But most games are, let's say, around 50% win rate. And that means that the players around you are similar skill on balance across both teams. The moment you duo queue with someone, the hidden MMR of the team you play against, if they're all solo queuers, would be slightly higher than you would otherwise play, because they know that as a duo queue, you will outperform a little bit, and therefore you're going to playing against a more difficult team. And so it, I think, inhibits to some level your ability to improve as a player. And from a win rate perspective or an RR perspective, it doesn't gain you anything. It's going to make the game harder, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't know if everyone knows that.
Yeah. You could definitely feel this very vividly if you pay attention to your SoloQ games versus your duo queue games. I think one thing I wanted to add for the SoloQ duo queue thing is I think it's actually in some unique circumstances, if you're trying to improve as a player, that duo queuing is better. And that's only if you and your duo are constantly pushing each other to get better. And you also give each other enough space to make mistakes. But that's like the one case out of all the others where your just duo is having fun, or maybe your duo isn't as locked in as you, like whatever the case may be. But it's like that's the one out of all the negatives.
Because you were doing a duo coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And how did that go?
So the guy that I was referencing earlier was one of the persons in the duo. The other duo ended up, so the initial climb for both of them were good, but I noticed in his duo games versus the SoloQ games, he took a lot more risk in the SoloQ games, and he ended up climbing a bit quicker solo compared to duo. So even in that case study, he made more progress solo. Okay. And it's not because that the duo was worse than him. I would argue that his duo was actually much better than him, but he's unable to grow as a player because of the restrictions
of not wanting to do something a little bit out of the box because you feel a social pressure.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, that's just very difficult. So like there are some unique cases where duo queuing can be good. You will likely also climb quicker if your duo queue and you are both really good at the game and really dialed in, but you will cap out. Like you won't actually improve at the game, but your visual rank might improve, and then you'll solo queue and then you'll dip back down because they might be covering up some weaknesses.
I see.
Which is why I think most of the time on the ranked ladder, like the top 10 players, they all get there via duo queue. And I think it's because you might be able to express your skill a bit more in a duo queue format, but you won't actually improve at the game. You're kind of just getting to that potential a bit easier because you have more control.
Yeah.
But people relate control over the game and improving at the game at the same thing, and I don't think that's really accurate.
I think there's also an element at that top level too of the duo providing you excess value relative to a duo at a lower elo rank. I think at a high level, they're going to be way more prone and capable of abusing their duo as a duo rather than at a typical low elo rank.
That's a good point. Like 1+1 in that sense is not 2. It's like 5 or 10. Whereas like everyone else listening to this, 1+1 is probably going to be 2 or lower. It's very rarely going to be 3 or 5.
Yeah, 1+1 is 1.5.
yeah. Which is weird. Yeah. So SoloQ, everyone.
Okay. Well, I just felt like that was an important topic to handle because it was just coming up in some of my interviews for Training Arc. So I hope that was helpful for everyone. Let us know if you liked the free rambling conversation at the beginning. We can do that more. I think we are at around 30 people now for the TVL tent. We're capping out at 50 and we are slowly plugging away. So I think in a couple months time, we're going to pull the trigger for the first scholarship, which would be super cool. And yeah, until next time, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
See ya.